Entertainment. This is a very, very, very important video for Halablac History Month. All too often, you have been taught Black History Month pointing about your past, and it hadn't helped you. You hadn't moved forward. You haven't. We haven't. You get a little success, then you fall. Halablac History Month is going to have to show you how to move forward. And it's in a book that I've gotten a long time ago, only 2 pages. So I shall read something to you that's for all of us that will show you what you need to do and how you need to do it. Get ready. Get your pen, get your paper, get your notes. Refer back to this, comment on it, get moving. Here we go. Civilization and cultures arise out of obscurity the following way. Number 1, state of savagery, slavery, or general self-defeating immorality. Next step. Number 2, thou shalt not type of religious laws are given which are intended to prevent emotionalism and self-defeating immorality. Hence, the term shall not, thou shalt not do foolishness. Number 3, next step. Basic music and poetry is the first form of thou shalt type of permissible culture to emerge. Kind of like when rap music first started. It's positive, it stimulates creativity, and it's easy to produce. Hence, the adage, music soothes the savage beast. Next step. Number 4, this positive music inspires artists and painters, which then convey and portray a positive vision of the new morality or emerging cultural renaissance. Hence the adage, where there is no vision, the people perish. 5, next step. Art and music leads to other craft, such as clothes making. A craftsmanship and workmanship ethic emerges. This craftsmanship leads to a basic understanding of the culture's particular aesthetics, economics, and tradesmanship. A small economy emerges. Bam! Next step. 6. The final and most important component is the rise of a class of scientists and professors, which serves to formally and methodically perpetrate the new culture and civilization. Scientists ensure that the culture flourishes. The emergence of organized scientists is proof that the culture has fully matured. The first and most important civilized institution created by scientists is generally a school, which is what we're creating online for you at Halablac Entertainment. This is one of the classes right now, this freestyle. Once the culture or civilization is established, politicians or governors are supposed to keep things regulated and in balance. However, this is all formally determined by the teams, the first teams of scientists. It is the scientists which formally and methodically determine that what the new culture should do in order to remain intact and avoid internal as well as external destruction. It is scientists that keep a nation healthy. A nation is judged by the quality of its scientific class. Is it unfortunate? It's very unfortunate, but even by the mid 1990s, Black Americans have not been able to thrust themselves out of the slave, savage immorality state. For example, in the early 1990s, when rap first emerged with its political and culturally positive messages, it was diabolically corrupted away from having any further civilizing effect on black youth. When we study the history, we see the same thing happen during the late 1960s and early 70s, when the positive political music of the blacks was corrupted by the pornographic Superfly dance disco music. Black Americans have had two semi-successful cultural renaissances that never fully matured without becoming aborted. During the late 1960s and the early 1990s, immediately after the rise of these political cultural movements, there was a corresponding movement back towards immorality and savagery. A good example of how a society successfully emerged out of its dark ages of immorality into prosperity is a study of Europe. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Europe came out of its infamous dark age and produced many painters, musicians, and most importantly, scientists. The celebrated Italian Leonardo da Vinci is a classic example of an artist, painter, and scientist rolled into one. Until Black Americans have a class of scientists which understand superior logic thinking, their cultural renaissance in art and music will continue to be aborted and knocked down. Allegorically, if they were little puppies playing with vicious big dogs, Black Americans remain on thou shalt not moral crusades, but have not yet determined what thou shalt do. You must give people something to do after you tell them what not to do or what's wrong to do. Black Americans are at the point in their history in which they must summarize their experiences in America and develop a class of scientists which can teach culture, civilization, and most importantly, nation building, superior logic thinking. Black Americans cannot haphazardly breed them ways into power, as there are some who think because our birth rate is higher than whites, this is called for optimism. If AIDS is indeed biological germ warfare, then whites have defeated us before black children are even conceived, thereby negating this power breeding theory. We must remember that historically, blacks have always outnumbered whites, but this has not prevented whites from devising diabolical ways of ruling us. The history of South Africa is a perfect example of this. To continue to believe in this misnomer is a form of emotional laziness devoid of logic. Black Americans must understand birth control and breeding control. This means allocating the world's obvious limited resources for the world's escalated population. Forests have been depleted, and the earth's resources are used up for superfluous things other than food. In other words, even if there were enough food to feed the world, it is not being managed properly anyway. For example, the amount of grain one cow eats during its lifetime could feed many more people than just the one cow by itself. The grain the cow could eat could feed 10 times as many people. People should eat the grain and not the cow. This is a classic contradiction. Yet, because of the world's influential meat lobby, the world will never consider this alternate point of view. World resources will continue to be squandered. Black Americans must learn what the concept of birth control and climate control means. The nation of China has over 1 billion people, 4 times the American population, and therefore has adopted a program in which a family cannot have more than 1 or 2 children. This policy to ensure that they can feed the children that they already do have. A nest must be born strong enough to support the weight of growing newborns. What is birth control? Modern man does not live close to nature anymore. Societies throughout the world are becoming increasingly industrialized, it's urban and automated. It may appear that the modernization may make life easier and simpler, but it creates more highly complex problems than it solves. One of the problems for Black Americans is chronic dependency upon government assistance. Urbanization for Black Americans is not an accident waiting to happen. It is an accident happening in slow motion. To make matters worse, Black Americans are not logical and scientific and do not understand the concept of climate control, quality control, or birth control as a meaning of controlling their own destiny. The idea of creating the future is considered spooky science fiction among Black Americans. They consider their future as something fatalistic, abstract, and intangible. Yet they will cry and moan about whites have future plans to exterminate the Black race through genocide, while having no plans of their own to secure themselves in a world in which they are repeatedly told there will not be enough resources to go around unless you yourself create them. Hence the adage, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. This is easy to understand once one considered that for 400 years, Black Americans as slaves were absolutely out of control of their fate and future. Superior logic thinking will compensate for this deficiency once it is acknowledged as such. Birth control is life control. Once the birth has been given life, what do Black Americans think is the fate of their children once they are brought into the world? Are we having children selfishly because we want a cute and cuddly baby to play with? The answer is yes. When one considers why people had children in ancient times, it was always because there was a need for these children and there was a place at the table for them. In the 1990s, Black Americans became married because of the romantic ideal or moral and not out of practical, pragmatic necessity as in rural societies. This is evidenced by the amazing divorce rate, a reported 50% plus. The practical need to stay married is not there, and people are not scientific enough to academically devise a reason to remain married aside from an antiquated religious morale. There is a good practical reason to remain married, and that is to keep one's nation together. But because Black Americans denounce nation building ideologies, their culture is decaying. For example, countries are not as involved as Americans into individualism and consumerism. Therefore, their families remain intact. If Black Americans become scientific and nation oriented, then their allegiance would be to nation building, and children born would be the manifestation of this allegiance and political agenda. Instead, Black Americans continue to keep up with the Joneses, however perverse the Joneses may be. Because Black Americans do not see the need to have a nation of their own, they will haphazardly bring children into the world as if they were still slaves, depending on the white benevolent master to provide for them. This is pitiful. Logic thinking helps Blacks understand what they must do to fortify their race. and then build a nation for their children. It deservedly admonishes them when they don't. Now, do I have the cover for this book? I think I do. And if I don't, if I'm not mistaken, it's called Superior Logic Thinking. Here it is. And I got this book in 1996. Look. Bam. Bam. I don't even know if you can order it now. But what I would like to say is that what you need to do is go back to the front. Those 6 things that need to be done: making our own, getting our own, keeping our own, because it's imperative. And the last thing I'm going to show you is this cartoon. It's a woman pointing at a black man, a black woman pointing at a black man, and she said, if you were a real man, you would have your own nation. And he's got his head down saying, she's right, but how do I build my own nation? And she's pregnant, and the baby in there is saying, you better ask somebody, daddy, and quick. Now I'm going to show you the picture. Halablac History Month, going forward and upwards. Blackwards, not backwards. Halablac History Month, not Black History Month. Now I'll show you the picture. I hope you can see it. And if not, boom. That looks good. Take a snapshot. Remember, I love you. Halablac. Now, how do we stop it? It's early in the morning. It's prayer time. Bam. We flipped it. We flipped it black. Bam. Boom.